Hi, I'm Ruth Martifio from the Information Lab's Data School, and I'm going to show you how to web scrape images in Alteryx using an API. This video follows on from those of my colleague Robin, who introduces APIs and data in more detail, and the video itself is going to be based on this blog he's created that downloads images from a Rick and Morty API to create an interactive viz in Tableau. So let's have a look at the API. So here we've got lots of data relating to the characters, and also it includes links to images of the characters. Every API will have documentation. So you can see in the documentation for the Rick and Morty API, they're giving us a sample request URL, which we'll copy, and you can tell us it's leading to the character. And for the character schema, you've got all the data and the structure it comes down in. Another important thing for us to pay attention to is it tells us we're going to receive the documents in 20 documents per page. So with the link copied, we can go into Alteryx. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that URL, download the data from that URL, and since it's coming down in JSON format, we're going to parse that, split out and tidy the bits we want to keep, then go back in from the downloaded data, take those URLs for the images, have a look at the images, and save them to our computer. So let's get started. So the first thing we need is a text input tool, and we're going to call this header URL and paste in the URL that we copied from the API. Then we'll need a download tool to go into that URL, take the string and download it as a string field. It's coming down in a JSON format, so we're going to take this JSON parse tool and say whatever comes into that download data, output that as a string field. So let's right click, we'll cache and run this because we don't need to make too many calls to the API. We just want to get the data and then we can look at it afterwards. So cache and run workflow, and out comes our JSON, and we can see that we've got all our results, and we probably want in between the results and this sort of header information, we've got all these numbers. So we'd want to split them out on each side of the full stop. So let's get a text to columns tool, and we'll say in that field JSON name, split it out on the full stop. And we only need 3 columns because we need the beginning, the middle, and whatever's to the other side. And we'll also take a select tool, and what we want to come out the other side, we don't need those headers, we don't need the JSON name, and we'll have a look and see what we need out of the new columns that are split out. So let's run that again. So we can see that we want these values, and we can see that it's going first character, we've got character ID 1, name, and then as it goes on to the next person, we've got character ID for the second person, and so on and so forth. So we could probably use this value of JSON name 2 as the index. So let's rename it index. And then we can see that all of these here look like column headers, ID, name, status. So let's rename that header. And we're going to be losing JSON name 1 because it's just results. And what we also notice as well is up here we've got some information about the data. We can see that we've got what's coming up for the next page, the total number of pages, etc., etc. But we don't really need this for our purposes. So we'll add a filter that's going to keep all of this as long as it's not null. So we're going to say header, which we've renamed it, is not null, and we'll run that. So out the other side, we probably don't need a URL as well. I don't know how that came through. So out the other side, we have the headers, the index, and all of the data that goes inside. What we want to do then is cross tab it. So this is going to take all of these values across the table. We're going to group it by the index, 0, 1, 2, 3. The headers are going to be what we called as header, and the values are going to be our values, and we're going to concatenate those to group them together. And let's have another look. So now we have everything that came down. all of the episodes they're in, which we're probably not interested at this point. And then back at the end, we have our names of characters, the location name, and the URL for these images that we want. So we can then go and have another select tool that says, let's deselect all of these episodes, etc. And we'll just keep maybe their status, name, image ID, gender. That will do for now. At this point, we have a smaller data set with all of the things we need. And we can now go and say, let's go and take these URLs. So we could take a JSON, a download tool, and we're going to go to the URL image. And this time, instead of taking it down as a string, we're going to take it down as a blob, a binary large object. And this is going to download those little images we saw from the when we looked at the API. Now, because we know it's coming down as an image, let's get an image tool and a browse tool so that we can actually look at what this image tool takes. Now, we're not taking it from a file. We're going to take it from the blob that comes down from the download data. And then we're going to have a look at that when it comes down. So in it goes. And now we have all of our images from the API. So now that we're happy with those, we can download these images to our computer. To do this, we're going to take a blob output tool, and that's going to take the downloaded images. Now, to make this, I've put them in as their own folder, Rick and Morty images, and we're going to call them character.jpg. What we can do is we can append every single one of the IDs to the field name. So we're going to get things like character 1, character 2, because we know each character has their own individual ID. Now, to be on the safe side, we might not always have all of the data. We might just have these URLs. So let's try and actually take the ID from the actual URL itself rather than just appending it from a separate column. So we'll go into the image URL and we'll say any non-digit, blah, blah, blah. And then we're going to have some digits, which are going to be our URLs. And obviously that's followed by some other non-digits, blah, blah, blah. So let's put brackets around the little bit we want. And we're going to tokenize that into just that one column, which is called character. And that means then instead of we have character, we're going to append each one of the little numbers that comes in that character column from the field. And also we've got a little output tool that's just taking our remaining data. We can export it as a CSV, or if you're going to use it in Tableau, you can export it as a hyper. So we've got our two sets of outputs, and then we can run that. And if we look in our folder, so you can see outside we've got the Rick and Morty data we've downloaded, and in our images we've got character 1, character 2, character 3. So as I mentioned earlier, we've only got 20 records here because it takes 20 records and then stop. So in the next video, I'll show you how to create an iterative macro that can then cycle through and take every single page until it's done. But in the meantime, you've downloaded data, saved some data, and you've got images and output them. Thanks for watching this video. You'll find all of the referenced materials in the links in the description. And if you enjoyed this, you'll like my next video, which is creating an iterative macro in Alteryx that will help you download multiple pages via an API. Click on the link to watch it next.